Most of you already met him, but I'll give a quick introduction. This is my father, Dr. Sudesh Kannan. And as he said, his degree is in materials engineering, but he regularly likes to talk about happiness, mindfulness, and making the most out of the life you have. Most of you know that IMSA can be a very stressful environment, and my dad's advice is always to embrace that. And so these are a lot of the lessons that have helped me out a lot, and I hope you'll find them to be as productive. So if you could please give him a big welcome, I'd like to.
So good evening. The topic today is small fish in big pond. Right? I went to a school very similar to IMSA. I went with my college degrees where typically in my year, in 81, about 100,000 students, geeks as I call them, applied for this exam, entrance exam. It's a 3-hour exam in math, 3 hours chemistry, physics, and then English. And out of the 100,000, only 2,000 get selected for the IITs, Indian Institute of Technologies. So you can imagine, if you think stress is a lot in IMSA, can you imagine the stress in those schools? So the term small fish in big pond is, most of you, right? You probably were in the top 10% in your neighborhood school. And suddenly when you come to IMSA, 90% of you are not in the top 10%. Are you following me? And that's the challenge, right? You start wondering, hey, am I smart? Where do I fit in things? And this term, there's a term for it, it's called relative deprivation. In World War II, what they did was, this gentleman by the name Robert Merton, he studied 2 groups of soldiers. One group, they were getting a lot of promotions because they were a very active group. And the other group were a military police where there was not much of promotions there. Okay? And the place where they got a lot of promotions was very competitive and people were very unhappy. Whereas in the place where there was no promotions, very few promotions, people were happy, very, very happy. And so, people, they started wondering what's going on. And it found out that many people get our happiness by comparing ourselves with others. So how does that work? If you have a big house in a poor neighborhood, you're likely to be more happy than if you have a small house in a rich neighborhood. Does that make sense? Logical, right? How about the next school that you choose? Okay, you could choose to go to Berkeley or Stanford. It's likely that you're in the middle of the class, right? You're not necessarily the top 5%. Whereas you go to a local school where you're the top 1%, you're likely to be more happy. So that's the theory behind you can be a small fish in a big pond or a big fish in a small pond. So now the question to you is that the only solution to happiness? Comparing ourselves with others? Fortunately, the answer is no. We have found that happiness has multiple dimensions. Everybody say with me, PERMA. P is for positive emotions. E is for engagement in positive emotions, engagement in your strengths. R is relationship. M is meaning. A is accomplishments. Okay? So accomplishments are a part of happiness. But if you bank completely on accomplishments, you're in trouble. Does that make sense? Positive emotions, most happy people show they're happy, right? If you see me, I have a grin on my face most of the time. Why? It's a positive emotion. I feel very grateful about anything. So that's the positive emotions. Positive actions. We were just talking about the VIA strength, right? You have to use you engage in your strengths regularly. Relationships. Now this is a very big misnomer, right? People think, I'm an extrovert. I thrive on relationships, right? Coming in this group and talking, it feeds me, it energizes me. But what if you're an introvert? If you're an introvert, you may have just 3 or 4 friends. But you know what? That's still important to you because the brain is a very social brain we have. And then meaning. like Dinesh said, right? IMSA, if you don't have any meaning as to why you are here, it's a very stressful experience. But if you enjoy your companionship, you enjoy the stuff that you're doing here, it's going to be great for you. And then accomplishments. And I'll tell you, here's the thing, it's important to set meaningful goals, but I'm telling you, it's not achieving the goals, it's the process of reaching those goals that are important. So we'll talk more about it. Let's go step by step. First, let's talk about the brain. So there are two things you need to understand, right? In psychology, they always talk about getting rid of depression, getting rid of anxiety and stuff like that. But the problem is when you remove depression, you still have a shell of a person, right? And I beg to differ in saying we need to go beyond just flat boredom. You need to go beyond. You've got to thrive, you have to be flourish. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And the second thing is this human brain, we think of it as one structure. We think of it as fixed, right? And I'm going to show you that the brain is actually a very complex organ and it's got multiple. There are 3 brains in one brain. And the second thing is it's a plastic brain. That means you can change your brain. You can change your brain by thinking, you can change your brain by behavior. So let's look at this. Okay, does anybody have any guess how many pounds a brain weighs? Average brain. 5 pounds, 10 pounds? Anybody? Yes? 20? 20 pounds, 20 pounds. Person weighs about 150 pounds, right? 20 pounds. Anybody else? 12. The average brain weighs 3 pounds. Okay? Weighs 3 pounds, but it takes 20% of your oxygen and 20% of your energy. So all this body that's built is to sustain that brain. Now here, I'll tell you more about this. Go ahead, put your hands like that. Okay? Make 2 fists. Make 2 fists, bring them together. Okay? That's your brain. And the lower part of the brain, you see this part? This is called the brain stem. It's about 200 to 100 million years old. We share that with the dinosaurs. It's called the reptilian brain. Okay? This is the one that has aggression, hunger, sex drive, monitoring your heart and lungs. All that comes from this part of the brain. It's about 75 to 100 million years old. Okay, now you see your thumbs inside. The thumbs inside is about 50 million years old. This is the limbic system. Okay? We share this with the rats. We share it with the ancient mammals like squirrels and things like that. We share that. This is the social part of our brain. Okay? When a mammal looks after its baby, all the emotions that you feel comes to this part of the brain. And this green little thing is called the amygdala. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the amygdala. It's called the fear radar. So all the emotions are there. And then the top layer is called the neocortex. And the neocortex is fairly new compared to the other brain. And that's the part of the brain that has all the cognitive functions, the thinking part of it, the words, and then the prefrontal cortex is the one that's got the executive functions. So this is a fairly complex brain. Why is this important? This is important because when we react to life, right, it's not one reaction, there are multiple reactions. So let's take an example, right? When I see puja, right? I've known puja for a long time. So there's a part of my brain called the fusiform gyrus. It looks at her face, and then it looks to my neocortex, and there the name puja is there. It puts it together. Okay? I've known her for at least a year now. So it's very easy for me to put that together. But have you seen many times when you know the person's face but you can't get the name? Why? Because it takes some time for the neocortex to interact with that. Does that make sense? Now instead, let's take another situation. I'm walking down the room and suddenly I see a king cobra. Okay, now you may say, that's not a problem. In India, a snake could be outside. Why? Because in the monsoon season, the rains come, the snakes are out, and they come inside buildings. Okay? So when I see a snake there, I'm not going to sit and say, oh, hooded creature, look through my neocortex, that's a king cobra, I better run. No, that's not the way it happens. What it does is, the moment the fusiform gyrus sees that shape, the amygdala is the radar screen, it's an ancient part of the brain. It looks, and I start running. And as I'm running, the neocortex says, hey, you just saw a snake, and that's why you're running. Are you following me? Unfortunately, this fight or flee system works on day-to-day stuff also. So when you're having a fight with your parents, your sibling, your roommate, the amygdala gets activated, and then your upper brain doesn't think. Are you following me? And so if you understand that concept, you understand stress. Stress is nothing but a reaction. Your evolution system is developed to fight or flee. And thanks to our social brain and our neocortex, it doesn't have to be that way. How many of you know any firefighter in your life? Firefighters, right? It's our instinct to run away from fire, right? But how do firefighters go into the fire? They practice again and again to the point that the neocortex, the prefrontal cortex, takes over charge and they can go inside. So that's what I want to tell you, is if you practice these techniques I'm going to teach you, your prefrontal cortex will work with your stresses. Does that make sense? Now, why am I talking about all this? So this is two people, Heath brothers and Jonathan Haidt, they come up with this theory. So think of your brain like this is the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain. This is the elephant, the rest of your brain, and this is the path. If you want to make changes, any changes in your life, right? You want to study more and all that. It's never enough. I hope you never get cigarette smoking or alcohol in your system, but if you want to make changes in your life, it's not enough to say cigarette smoking is bad for me, or it's not enough to say alcohol is bad for me, right? Why? Because the bug, the elephant, follows the path that you set for you. If you are drinking friends, you probably have drinking buddies. So every Friday night, you probably go with your drinking buddies. And the elephant takes over, and you go to the bar. Though your prefrontal cortex tells you it's not a smart thing to do. Do you understand? How many times have you felt this is the right thing to do, but you go ahead and do the dumb thing anyway? Welcome to your elephant in your brain. So hopefully you're going to see a lot of good ideas here today, right? And if you want to use these ideas, set the path for yourself and then use the elephant to take you in the right direction. That means get the emotional reasons why you want the change to be made and then set yourself a path. So if you want to exercise regularly, right? I'll tell you one, you want to deal with stress, have physical activity. Even 15 minutes of physical activity is better than 1 hour of meditation, okay? So what's the path you could do? You could have your best buddy say, hey, let's team up and let's go for exercise every morning. So why is the elephant happy? Hey, I'm going to spend time with my buddy. And then you got a path why you guys decided you want to go to the gym. Are you following me? And so this is the most important thing, is in this lecture you're going to get a lot of good ideas. But until unless you use them, unless you shape the path for you and you motivate the elephant, the rider can't do much by itself. So let's start with the first thing. PERMA, right? First one is P, is for positive emotions. Here's the good news for you. If you don't feel happy on a daily basis, if you don't feel grateful, you don't feel awe or optimism, guess what? You need to be intentionally aware of it. That means you do activities that make you use that emotion. So for example, sense of awe. Okay? Guess what I do? I always, whenever I need a sense of awe, I Google Hubble telescope pictures, right? Hubble telescope photos. And I don't know about you, I got to just see a star being formed or a galaxy picture, and it fills me with awe. Okay? I traveled all over the world, and now, unfortunately, I cannot travel across the world. So how do I get my happiness associated with travel? I'm a public TV junkie. Rick Steves Europe, Globe Trekker, you name the videos, I'm there watching it. Does that make sense? I'm intentionally making time for happiness. Similarly, hope and things like that. So let me give you one example. Humor and fun. Oops. How could anybody ideas on humor and fun? How could you get humor and fun intentionally? Yes?
looking at things through less of a serious lens and being able to joke around, even with yourself sometimes.
Excellent. You could play pranks. You could play pranks on your roommate, right? And there are people who do that, right? They play pranks on other people regularly. I mean, it could be a mean way of doing it, but you could do it a fun way. But the point I'm trying to say is generate positive emotions regularly. And I'm going to talk to you about one more particular, is gratitude. Okay? It's not happiness that makes us grateful, but gratefulness makes us happy. And there are two techniques I'll tell you again and again that are very, very powerful. One is called, in the night before I go to sleep, I write 3 things that I'm grateful for. And it could be inane things. Hey, I had a great falafel sandwich today, okay? And I ate healthy, right? And second one is thank you for my son, thank you for my sons, those kind of things. So that's one way of gratitude. The second one is to write a gratitude letter. And I'm telling you, this is an awesome thing, especially who have gratitude in your top 3 strengths. Take time to think of somebody who's special to you. And write for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, write 1 or 2 pages. And then call that person up and fix up an appointment with them. Face to face, read the letter to them. I promise you, both of you will cry, but we cry of happiness. But believe me, it's something that will charge you for the whole month. I try to write a gratitude letter at least once a month, but even if you do once a year, it'll be great. So does that make sense? These positive emotions, you use them with intentional activities. Now, you may argue with me, right, hey, not genetics plays a role in happiness, and circumstances play a role in happiness. But the good news is, social psychologists are showing again and again that if you're willing to do intentional activities, you can even bypass genetics. So here's a person sitting in a beautiful spot. How many of you would like to be in that spot? Raise your hand. All of us, right? That looks fairly beautiful. What's the problem with that? We could all get rid of our stresses in life and just be sitting like that in that tree there, right? Yes?
You can't stay in that spot forever. That's not really how life works.
Exactly. Here's the thing. I've been in life for 1 month or 2 months. I've been in that state where I had nothing to do. It's boring. Okay? I'm not saying we need to do this once in a while. We need to do this once in a while. But it's boring. So what is the next opposite thing? Surfing, right? So this is the challenge in life, right? We can get drowned in the waves that come to us, or we can learn to surf. You cannot stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. What does that mean? You cannot stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. Okay, Pooja, let's try Pooja.
It's a choice thing. You don't necessarily. You choose how to react to situations.
Excellent. So you're given, right? Stress in IMSA is a given. And I'm going to tell you here that stress is actually a good thing. Why? Because I told you, right? The brain's designed to handle stress. So here's the very fascinating study they did at University of Wisconsin-Madison. They took 29,000 people and asked them the question I'm going to ask you. How many of you have low level of stress in the past 1 year? Low level of stress. Almost nobody. That's good. How many of you have moderate level of stress? Be honest. Moderate level of stress. Okay, 3 or 4. How many of you had high levels of stress? Be honest. Yeah. Okay. Now here's the thing they did. They asked the people this question, and the next question they asked them was, is that stress good for you or bad for you? So some people said it's good for me. Some people said the stress is bad for me. The people who said, and what they did is they followed up for 8 years, and every year they looked at the public records and see how many people died. That's all they did, 29,000 people. The people who had high levels of stress and who thought stress was bad, they had a 45% higher rate of dying than the people who said they have high stress, but stress was meaningful to them. Are you following me? And that's the same thing I'm telling you. When you are in IMSA and you have a lot of stress, if there's meaning in that stress for you, then that. And does the meaning have to be the same for everybody? No, it's different for different people. So any stress that you have in your life, ask yourself why. And there's a lot of research done on this. There's a great video on our website, and it's called by Kelly McGonigal, The Importance of Stress. And the point I want to make here is, stress has benefits for you, okay? And I always tease Vinesh, right? Whenever he says, I got too much homework to do, I'm too stressed. Always tell him he's got a choice, right? He could leave the school and he could come back to the neighborhood school where he can do his homework in 30 minutes, right? But guess what? He knows I'm teasing him because he has a lot of meaning in his Stadco work, in the friends that he has built up here, and the academics that he does. Are you following me? That you have to make meaning from your stress. I'm telling you, some of the relationships you're going to form here are going to be the best relationships you had. Why? Because it's being formed under a lot of stress. Meaning, pleasure. How many of you are procrastinators? Be honest. We're all procrastinators, right? Guess what? Stress is the one that gives us focus and sportive energy. So when somebody tells you stress is bad for you, stress is only bad for you if you decide to make it bad for you. Does that make sense? And then, I'm not saying live a life totally with stress, okay? You have to make time for relaxation, because relaxation will help you flow, high energy, it will build relationships, it will build you strong in production, and it will bring more. So it's a combination, that's what I'm stressing. So where does this come to us? So this comes to the second one is E. First one is P for positive emotions, E is for engagement. So you did the VR strength test, right? This graph is fairly easy. Low skill level to high skill level, low challenge level to high level. So if you are a good singer, right? If you sing well, you have a high level of skill, you sing an easy piece, you're relaxed. You do a really tough piece, you get flow. Very, very simple. So if you're good at math, if you do easy problems, it's relaxed. But if you are doing tougher problems, it's the flow. If you have anxiety, that means your skill level is not good enough. If you increase your skill level, you're going to be in the flow. Does that make sense? So anytime when you feel anxiety or you're worried, understand that you are in this zone. All you need to do is increase your skill and go there. If you're bored, that means your skill level is moderate, but you're not challenged enough. Most of you would be, if you had been in your neighborhood school, you'd have been here. And that's why you probably chose to IMSA. How many of you understand that? Raise your hand. So that's the key thing. And this concept came about by a person by the name Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He's a professor in university, he was in the University of Chicago. Let me tell you a quick story. How many of you know Dr. Purva Dewar? Dr. Purva Arushi. Okay, which department is she? What is she?
The Chief of Staff.
What's that?
Chief of Staff.
Chief of Staff, okay. So, this is a very interesting story about it. Csikszentmihalyi, right, he's a European, and after World War II, he was basically a refugee, and he was in Switzerland he was bored in the summer, and he went to attend a talk by Carl Jung. How many of you know Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud? Okay, Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud are famous psychologists. So, Carl Jung was talking to a group of people about flying saucers, okay, flying saucers, and how after World War II people were stressed out and they were seeing flying saucers everywhere. And Csikszentmihalyi got really excited about that, and that's how he became a psychologist, and he did this great work. He did this great work at the University of Chicago, and his student was Dr. David Chernoff. And Dr. David Chernoff, and he did a lot of work among students and how flow comes in students. And in fact, a lot of the material I'm talking comes from here. Dr. David Chernoff went to NIU, and he was the advisor of Dr. Purva Dewar. So I thought it was pretty cool to see Carl Jung, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, David Chernoff, and IMSA. So that's a pretty cool connection. The geeky part of me found it very interesting. Okay, now, I don't want you to think that I'm always talking about being in the flow, being high, being happy, right? That's not the part of it. There's a great movie, video in your IRC thing called by Brené Brown. And she talks about vulnerability. She talks about shame. She talks about guilt. I'm an Asian Indian kid, okay? For me, my motivators were fear, guilt, and shame. Oh my God, if I apply for the IIT and I don't get it, that means I'm not worthy enough. Are you following me? And Brené Brown says that vulnerability, that putting yourself in a place where you don't feel you're worthy enough, that's the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. So I'm challenging you that if you get a seat in Stanford University, you may be the bottom of Stanford University, but you have an opportunity to grow from it. Does that make sense? So I'm trying to tell you a lot of happiness comes from facing the challenges in your life, facing the guilt in your life, facing the shame in your life. So when you feel sad, when you feel depressed, when you feel a lack of motivation, understand that importance of that. Does that make sense? So embrace your sadness as much as you embrace your happiness. So first one is P is PERMA, right? PERMA is P is positive emotions, E is engagement. Now, third one is relationships. Now you're going to ask me, right, how do I deal with sadness? How do I deal with challenges in my life? So one part of it is definitely physical activity, right? You do a lot of physical activity. Second one is you reach out to people. Remember that brain is a social brain, right? So one of the things you could do is you can work with people. And I'll give you a very simple example of that. Every interaction you have with a person, right, can come in these 4 categories. It could be active and constructive, it could be passive and constructive, it could be active and destructive, it could be passive and destructive. So let me give you an example. Let's assume one of your parents comes to you and say, I got a promotion, right? The logical way to say is, wow, that's great. I know how important this promotion was to you. I'm very proud of you, Dad. Let's go celebrate. That seems the logical way. But do you think we always do that? No. Sometimes we'll say, oh my God, Dad, does that mean that you're going to be traveling a lot? Does that mean you're not going to come and pick me up in IMSA on Friday nights? Do you understand that? That's an active and a destructive way of reacting to that. Do we do that? Yes, we do that sometimes, right? If somebody gets a university, they go far away, we are saying, oh my God, you're going far away, I'm not going to have you anymore in my life, right? Instead of feeling happy for that person. Passive news, that's constructive, that's good news. Okay, or the worst one is, right, passive and destructive. You're not listening to that person. So what are we doing Friday night? How many of us are guilty of doing these kind of things? Raise your hand. We're all doing that, right? We're doing that all the time. We're not sitting and doing active constructive. I'm telling you, one thing that you could do to improve your relationship is try to spend a lot of time with this, with your best friends, with anybody you have. It's amazing. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Maybe? And the other one that's important is you're not lived today till you're done something for someone who can never repay you. So when people come up with the ideas of saying, do an act of kindness, that's a great way for your brain to feel. How many of you have done acts of kindness and have felt great about it? Most of us, right? Our brain is wired that way. This is the one that's the hardest one, is man's search for meaning, right? Why did when you asked me to give this talk, right? I'm not a trained psychiatrist, I'm not a trained psychologist, but why did I come to give this talk? When I was in my first year in IIT, remember that 100,000 people, when you get 2,000, you think, hey, I'm in the top 2% of the high school population, right? You think a lot of it. The first semester I go to IIT Madras, I collect a bunch of D grades, 3 or 4 D grades, okay? So my grade point average went plummeting down. Guess what did that to my self-esteem? Not very good. Then the second semester, I start in January, right? February, my father dies of a massive heart attack. Can you imagine a 19-year-old who's been crushed to the bottom with his grades, and then your parent dies? I still wonder how that 19-year-old person survived. I'm in front of you, that means I survived, right? And what is the reason behind that? I had a lot of meaning in my life. I had some great relationships. Like now, and that time I had people who supported me. Does that make sense? So a lot of the friends around you, even 1 or 2 friends that you have, treasure them because they are very important. And then meaning. You saw, right, my strength was learning. And those days I used to do computer programming, and I enjoyed computer programming. I used to find the toughest program to write, and I used to write that. So I was in the flow with that. I learned photography, I learned gourmet cooking, I learned all kinds of things. So does that make sense, how to find the meaning in life? And there's this person by the name Viktor Frankl, and he wrote a great book called Man's Search for Meaning. It's a very interesting story. We talked about Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, right? Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. In 1930s, Viktor Frankl basically wrote, he was studying suicides among college students, right? Students who didn't find any meaning and they were committing suicide. And he came up with a book, Man's Search for Meaning. And what happened was in 1939, what happened in 1939 in Vienna? Anybody? Any history buffs? The Nazis came over and took over Vienna, Austria. And Viktor Frankl is a Jewish name, so they took him and his family and put them in a concentration camp. He lost everything, he lost all his family. I think only his sister survived because she was in Australia or something like that. And the manuscript was also lost. So can you imagine, this person was totally, he lost all his clothes, everything he lost. In that point of despair, he looked around and he found even in that very bad situation, there were people who were okay with it. They were dealing step by step. They found time to be kind to other people. And that's the beauty of the thing. You'll never see the word Nazi or Jew in that book, because he said there were kind guards and there were cruel prisoners. Okay? And so he basically found out that the people who survived that bad situation were the people who found meaning in life. And he said, we needed to stop asking about the meaning of life and instead to think of ourselves as those who are being questioned by life daily and hourly. That means at every time, right? This is not being a Mother Teresa and thinking of world-saving things. It's about the meaning that you find. It's not what your parents tell you, it's not what your friends tell you. It's what meaning you have for life. Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problem and to fulfill the task which it constantly sets for us each individual. So you could be creating art, you could fall in love with somebody and take care of them, right? They're more important to you. Or if you are facing a very disastrous thing like cancer or something, you ask yourself, what is the meaning in your life? And that, I'm telling you, is the most important thing you can do as an IMSA student. Because you have so many talents and so many skills, but you have to say, what is it that keeps me excited? What is it that makes pleasure? Right? As a parent, right, I'm always worried that Dinesh is not getting the right food, he's not sleeping enough, he's getting stressed out with homework. But where is it important? I realize, and my wife realizes, that there's a lot of meaning for Dinesh in IMSA by the things he does. And it doesn't have to make sense for other people. It makes sense for him. That he's passionate, he's excited. Does this make sense? And this is what meaning of life is. So remember, it's PERMA. P is for positive emotions, E is to be engaged, R is relationships, M is meaning, and the last one is accomplishments. Do you want to know who you are? Don't ask. Act. Action will delineate and define you. Hopefully you got a lot of ideas from today's talk, right? And the main point I want to tell you in this slide is Thomas Jefferson. I got my PhD at University of Virginia, which was founded in 1819 by Thomas Jefferson. And he was 79 years old when he founded, because that was meaningful to him. And so that's the main thing I ask. And today what we're going to do is, once we finish this talk, we have one more activity. We have the gratitude letter. Hope you take time to write the action. Because if you want to change your brain, it's all good to get all these ideas, but until you practice this, until you share this, until you, share it and then practice it, it's not going to make sense. So I thank you very much for the time that you spent with me. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you again, and thanks to Student Council and the project lead for organizing this. Thank you very much.